Okay, thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome. Today we're going to discuss using Salesforce.com's automated workflows and approvals processes with Common Ground and Luminate users. I'll explain what workflows and approvals are and how they can be used in your daily activities with a few different scenarios we're going to go through today. My name is Julie Maklick, and I'll be your host for the webinar today. I'm a consultant on staff at CalPartners, and I have a background in fundraising, event and program management, and database implementation. We also have Kevin Burpo, co-founder of CalPartners, with us today, and he'll be moderating the webinar. We are recording this webinar today, so you'll find that your line is muted. If you do have a question, please type it in, and Kevin and I will try to answer as many questions as we can during the presentation and after in our allotted time. If we're not able to answer your question today, I will make sure to follow up with you individually afterward. So let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to take just a second to tell you a little bit about CalPartners. We were founded in 2008, and our founders have over 40 years of combined experience working with nonprofits and over 20 years combined experience working with software as a service technologies. We've worked with over 700 nonprofits and 500 higher education clients, and we have a broad and deep range of technology and best practice experience that reaches beyond just our certifications with Convio and Salesforce. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk about our agenda for today. It includes a quick discussion about the Salesforce platform and some of the functionality it can provide, and we'll also walk through workflows and approvals, explain what they are, how they're used, and then we'll give you several examples that you can implement to save time on your daily activities and give you more power out of Common Ground or Luminate. And then finally, I'm going to give you some additional resources and answer any questions you might have. So let's go ahead and get started. Included in Convio Common Ground is the ability to use features of the Salesforce platform that Common Ground is built on. Available on this platform includes objects like case management, which can assist with support requests, and I've even used this to track information like testimonials or frequently asked questions that clients have. You can also access what is called content, which is a great document sharing feature which you can use to share information internally as well as externally. And then workflows and approvals, which is what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start first with workflow. A workflow is an action that is triggered by inserting or changing a data record. These workflow actions can include sending an email, setting values to fields, sending an external message, or creating a task. And these workflows can be triggered either immediately or you can set it to begin at a designated time after the event. So say 5 days before one of your events or 90 days after a donation is made. One thing to note about workflow rules is that it does not impact existing records. It gets applied to a new record or after you edit the record. So think about that whenever you're creating your workflows. So to create a workflow, it consists of 3 steps. First, you specify the object. Then you specify the evaluation criteria. So this is when the workflow should be executed. And then finally, you define the role criteria. So this is an example of whenever a volunteer status is pending. So let's go ahead and create a workflow together. And the first workflow we're going to do together is going to be a major donor follow-up. So an example of using this would be after someone has given a gift and you want to keep in touch with them. And you'll do this based upon, say, the amount of the gift and when the gift is received. So this allows you to keep in touch with these major donors without really having to think about it and have it set on your calendar as a to-do. So what we're going to do is first go to create a new workflow rule. So you'll click on your name and then Setup. And then we're going to go over under the App Setup and click on Create. And you'll see this Workflow and Approvals here. We're going to drill this down, and we're going to click on Workflow Rules. And what I've done is created a view here just for my workflow rules to see what I've done recently instead of having to look at all of my organization's rules. So I'm going to go back to my workflow rule and create a new rule. And since we're talking about following up with a donor and their major gift that they made, that means we're looking at donations, which is based on the opportunities object. So we're clicking the opportunity object here, and we're going to click on Next. From here, we want to give our name a name for our rule. So this could be example of major donor follow-up. And if we wanted to write a description in here, we could. We could say this rule is going to create a task to send to owner for a major gift follow-up. And I'm going to have this set for whenever a record is created or when it is edited. That way, if a gift did come in later on, this rule would still trigger. So what I want to do is run this rule if the following criteria is met. And what I'm going to look like is the opportunity amount. And I'm going to focus on anyone that's given me a gift that is greater or equal to $5,000. Because for me, that's going to be considered a major gift. And then I'm also only want to look at opportunities that have actually come in. So I'm going to click on the Opportunity 1 field here. And I want this to be equal to true. So now this is going to look for any gifts that came in equal or greater than $5,000 and they have been received. So now that I've set my criteria here, now I want to go ahead and create my workflow action. So here, I'm going to click on New Workflow Action, and I want to create a task. And I'm going to assign this task to me. You could assign this to any of the users that you have listed in your organization. And I'm going to create a subject. And I'm going to say this is a major donor follow-up call. And I want my due date for this task to happen 90 days after the gift was given. So what I'm going to do is look at the opportunity close date here. So that's the date that the gift came in. And I want to add 90 days to that. And so that way, 90 days from the close date of that gift, I will have a task due to follow up with this donor. So I want my status of my task here to be not started. And I'm going to make my priority high because I feel like this is something I really want to focus on. And from here, I'm going to click Save. So now you can see I have my rule criteria of any gift greater or equal to $5,000 that has been brought in. And I've created my task to follow up with my major donor here. Now I'm almost done. First thing I want to do here is click Done. And then you want to activate this rule. It's really important not to miss this step. Because if you do, you'll keep going and trying to figure out why your rule isn't working. So always check that your rule is active. So let's go ahead and see what it looks like now whenever a gift comes in at the amount of $5,000 or more. So what I'm going to do is just clone an existing gift that I already have in here. and save it. And then if I go to my home page and I look at all of my upcoming tasks, I can see that I have a new one here. It's a major donor follow-up call that's due here on February 15th, 2012, which is 90 days after the close date. So this is one way to automatically create follow-ups for certain type of gifts and certain type of donors within your organization. So let's go ahead and look at another type of workflow rule that we can do. And instead of fundraising, let's look at events. So what I'm going to do is go back into my setup here. And the first thing that we want to talk about before we do our workflow for this event reminder is to look at our email template. Because what I want to do is trigger my workflow rule and have it send an email to people that are attending an event. So first thing I need to do is create my template here. So if you go into Setup, Personal Setup, Email My Templates, you can see that I've already created an event reminder template here. And it just simply states that it's a reminder to attend whatever event they're registered for and the event date, and I look forward to seeing them. Just a very simple message here, which you can customize however it suits your organization. But now that I have my template set up, I'm going to go ahead and create my workflow rule. So I'm going to go under App Setup, Create, Workflows and Approvals, and Workflow Rules. And here we can see my recent major donor follow-up rule that I created. And now we're going to create another one. And this time, I'm going to relate it to the event invitation object. And I'm going to click Next. And for my rule name, I'm going to say Send Event Reminder. And what's great about this type of rule is you could even apply this to volunteer shifts. So as soon as someone is signed up for a volunteer or registered for an event, you can use it in both ways. That way, as soon as the registration takes place, you can just automatically know that they'll get a reminder. So we're just talking about event reminders right now. So I want to pull up the event invitation registration stage. And I want to find people who are registered. So I'm going to click on the registered value here. And that's all I need for my criteria on this one. So I'm going to go to the next page. So now this is going to look for criteria of anyone who has an event invitation set to registered. So what we want to do now is create a rule that's going to send them our email template that we looked at earlier 5 days before the event date. So what we want to do is add a time trigger. And what we want to do is say this is going to come out 5 days before the event date. And click Save. So now that we have our trigger and our rule criteria, we can now create our workflow action, and this time we're doing a new email alert as opposed to the task that we did last time. So I'm going to click on New Email Alert and give it a description. I'm going to say Event Reminder Email. And then I'm going to search for my template here. Here's my event reminder template. And then now we want to select who's going to receive this email. And the way that you do that is we're going to go down to the related contact. And the related contact allows you to pull the email address then from that contact on the event invitation. If you wanted to, you could add additional email addresses here, and you could always be CC'd on an event reminder that went out if you wanted to. So I'm going to go ahead and save. And now my workflow for sending out an event reminder 5 days before the event is now completed. So I want to click Done. And I can't forget to activate my rule. So now that my rule is activated, let's go ahead and register for an event. I'm going to go to my events here. And I can see that this event is in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new invitation here. I'm just going to clone one that already exists. And make sure that my registration stage is registered, and click Save. And so now that I've done that, this contact here will receive an email invitation 5 days prior to the event. And if they register, say, 3 days prior to the event, they will still get this rule since it was edited at a later date. And here is an example of what the event reminder looks like that comes through to the individual. So that is a sample of what workflows can do. And so let's go ahead and talk about approvals now. So the approval process can be a little confusing without careful planning. One thing that's great is Salesforce provides an approval cheat sheet that includes several common examples. It's available in the Salesforce help section, and then I also have a link to it in our additional resources here afterwards. The easiest way I found to start planning your process is to simply draw out the flow of the process, and this allows you to visually map the steps for an approval. So an approval process is different than a workflow in that it's an automated process your organization can use to approve records. So lots of organizations will use this for vacation requests, expenses, job candidates, certain things like that. An approval process also specifies the steps necessary for a record to be approved and who must approve it at each step. This step can apply to all records during the process or just certain records that have certain characteristics or attributes. To create an approval, it consists of the following steps. Instead of those 3 steps like we had for workflows, approvals is a little bit longer. It's a 5-step process. So the first one is to create your process. And so what that means is what happens when a record is submitted for approval. The next thing is the definition or the steps of your approval process. So this is who should the records be routed to. And then the next step is your initial submission. So this is the criteria for that first submission into your approval process. And then you want to look at the approval. So what happens whenever a record is approved? And then also the final rejection. So what happens whenever a record is rejected? And then also what if someone recalls their submission for an approval? So let's go ahead and take a look at how to set up an approval. But before we do that, we want to make sure that we have our manager hierarchy or roles set. So if you look here on my user record, you can see that my manager is manager approval. And I just created that for today's webinar. And if we go and we look at the manager approval user, we can see that his manager is Kevin Burbo. And so from here, we've created a hierarchy that we can use in our approval process. So the first type of approval we're going to start is to create one for approving volunteers before they're actually assigned to a volunteer assignment. So let's say, for example, you require background checks or in-person interviews prior to being approved. You can go ahead and set people that are volunteers as pending, and then once approved, we can go ahead and funnel them through the approval process. So what we're going to do is in our setup screen, here we are, we're going to go again to the app setup, create, workflow and approvals again, but this time we're going to go to approval processes. And the approval processes is set here upon objects just like our workflow rules were. So for the first one, we're going to look at shift assignment. And we want to create a new one. A Jumpstart wizard allows you to create a one-step approval process quickly, and then the standard setup is if you have more than one. So we're just going to go ahead and use the standard setup just to walk you through the process. So the first thing you want to do is set the name of your process. For this one, we're going to say shift assignment. And for here, we want to look at anyone whose status is set to pending. After we've set that criteria, we're going to go ahead and go to next. So now, this is asking who is going to approve it. What I want to do is have my manager approve this. And so this is going to be, for example, for me, my manager is going to be this manager approval. So you can also here decide if only administrators can edit this record during the approval process, or if the assigned approver can edit it during the approval process as well. For this purpose, we're going to say administrators or the currently assigned approver. So next, it's going to ask if we want to have a template for whenever we are notifying the manager that they have a new approval. And I want to say yes. So I have a template built like we saw before in our email template. And this one is called New Volunteer. I'm going to go ahead and save that and click on Next. And so this is the approval page layout. So this is what the manager is going to see when they're trying to decide if they want to approve this record or not. So the fields that I will want him to just quickly be able to see is the contact shift ID, maybe their account, definitely who the contact is, their shift date, the status, and how about the job and the job shift as well. Now, this is a very important checkbox. If you click on this checkbox, it will allow the history of any prior approvals to be listed. And so if a record was, say, rejected for some reason and now it's coming back for additional approval, this would show that information here. If that's not important to you, you can disregard this checkbox. The security settings here are for the approver or the manager in this case. If I want them to only be able to approve it from within Salesforce, or if I want to allow them to approve things externally, say from their phone or whatnot, and I want to only allow them to do it internally. And so now we're going to determine who can submit records. So who can go on to our volunteer shift assignments, add volunteers, and put their status at pending. And so this is going to be your users internally. And so I'm going to allow all of these people from my organization to be able to do that, or you could just select your program and volunteer staff. This is also where you're going to allow people to recall their requests if they want to not have it approved at that time. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And so now we can go ahead and create our first approval step. Or you can say, I'd like to do this later. But what we're going to do now is say, yes, I'd like to create my first approval step. I'm going to go ahead and click Go. So from here, I'm going to put the approval process name. So I'm going to name this Volunteer Shift Approval. And I'm going to say that all records can enter this step. I don't have any specific criteria that I need to look at for them to come through. So I'm going to click Next. And then what I'm going to do here is determine who is going to be my approver. And for this particular one, I'm going to say it's my manager. So I'm going to click Save. And so now it's going to ask me if I would like to add any additional workflows. I'm going to say no, so I can go ahead and look at everything that I've done so far. So now I can see my entry criteria as I'm looking at any shift assignments that comes in with the status of pending. When that happens, it's going to lock the record from being edited, and then it's going to send an approval to the manager to then say if this record is approved or not. And so what happens after the manager says that it's approved? Well, we need to add that step. So what we're going to do for this instance is create a field update. And what we want to do is set a name for our field update, and we're going to call this Set Volunteer Shift. And the field that we want to update is the status field. Whenever I click this field to update here from the drop-down, it's going to bring the values here from my status field. And so whenever my manager approves someone who's pending, they're going to automatically go to Signed Up. And I'm going to click Save now. And just like our workflow rules, we want to make sure that we activate it when we're done. So now we've created our first approval. So let's go ahead and take a look at exactly what we created. So what I'm going to do is go to my events. My volunteer jobs, and I have just a test one here called can sorting. And what I want to do is add someone to the shift assignment. It's just going to be me. And I want their status to be pending. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save here. And now you can see I have this option to submit for approval. So I want to say OK. And I can now see that this record was submitted by me, and it was sent to my manager for approval. And I went ahead and made this manager approval email mine, so we can see here that the volunteer status email that I sent or set up earlier was sent to me to let me know that there's something to be approved. But what I will also want to do is go into this manager approval instance so I can see that I have something to approve. And so the best way to do this is you can add your approvals right here onto your home page. So you can see now I'm in this manager approval And I'm going to go to their setup. And I'm going to go to Customize Home and their homepage layout. And this is the current layout that they're using. So I want to edit it and click on this Items to Approve checkbox here. Click Next. And here I can decide where I want this to be. And I'm going to put it right below my task. And click Save. So now, on my Manager Approval homepage, I can see here my items to approve are now under my tasks. So directly from here, I can approve or reject it, or I can click here to look at the record itself. So I'm going to go ahead and approve this record and put any notes in here that I want to for approving or rejecting. So now we can see that this was approved. Now if we go back into my record here and we refresh the page, you can see now, and back on the Julie Makulik user, you can see that this has now been approved. And if you look, the status was automatically brought to signed up instead of pending as it was before. So a great thing about this is if you think about workflow rules like we just created before, if you take the same theory behind the event email that we sent earlier, you could trigger it on, say, this shift assignment status is signed up. As soon as someone's record gets signed up, you could send them an event reminder about their volunteer job. So that's one way to use approvals, and let's look at another way. So I'm going to go back to my setup, and we're going to create a multi-step approval this time. So for this example, we're going to have this approval go to my manager and then also my manager's manager. So within Common Ground, you know that you can track event expenses. So what we want to do here is look at our event expense and how we can track those for approval after it's created. So what we want to do is create a new approval process. But this time, we're going to relate it to event expense. And we're going to use the standard setup wizard again. And for this one, we're going to call it event expense approval. Okay. And we actually don't need any criteria sent for this one. So we're actually just going to go ahead and skip this step here. We do want to have the next automated approver be the manager. So we're going to go ahead and go to next. And then we do want to go ahead and include our event expense template. So we're going to look for those here. And here's our event expense template that we already have created. And so now we're going to decide what we want to be on that layout for my manager to look at when he's approving my event expense. So I want to have the event, the expense name. I'm also going to bring over the event, the projected cost, maybe the vendor, a description, and if they're going to donate it, what the donated value is. And then I want to include that approval history. Go ahead and click Next. And so now I want to decide who can submit expenses, I'm going to go ahead and allow all of my team to go ahead and submit expenses, and they can also recall them. So what I want to do now is create my first approval step. And I'm going to call this initial review. And so I'm going to go ahead and have all records enter this step. And what I want to do is I want to let whoever's submitting this expense choose who they want to approve it. I could have this just go straight to their manager, but say I want some more flexibility if it's working with different departments. So I'm going to let the submitter choose the approver manually. So I'm going to say no here, and let's just take a look at what we've done so far. So right now we're looking at event expenses being submitted, and we have one approval step first, which is just the initial review. But I want to go ahead and, like we said, do a multi-step. So after I've manually chosen who's going to review my event expense first, I want then, from there, to have their manager approve that expense. So I'm going to do a new approval step, and we'll call this a budget approval. And I'm going to say that all records should enter this step. And then I'm going to automatically assign this to the manager. So this will go to the person who I have selected to approve it, their manager, once they've approved it. And I'm also going to say if they reject it, that this will happen for the final rejection as well. So I'm going to go ahead and save. And I'm going to say no, I'll do this later because I'm done with setting all of my approval steps. And since I have already set the final rejection with my budget approval, I can go ahead and activate this rule. So now it is complete. So let's go ahead and submit an expense and see what happens. So here is an event. And let's go ahead and do a new event expense. And I'm going to say this is a deposit for the venue. And it's going to cost about $500 is what I think. So I want to get approval. So now that I've submitted this event, I want to submit it for approval right here. And now I get to pick who I want to approve it. And I'm just going to go ahead and select my manager here and go ahead and send it on over. So now if you look, it shows that I have submitted this event expense, and now I've sent it over to manager for approval. So if we go into our manager approval instance here, we can see that there's a new event expense to be submitted. And I can go here to approve or reject it. I can say, great price, approved. So now it's going to be sent to manager, which will be Kevin at this time. So we can see here that it's been approved here, but pending, we're waiting for Kevin. You can also look and see that the manager received a new email that says an event expense has been submitted for approval. So now if we go back into my record and we refresh it, we can also see that it was approved by the manager, and then it's now pending for Kevin. Great. So now I just want to show you some additional resources that are available for approvals and workflows. There's a great approval process checklist that Salesforce has created which lets you help map out the flow and then also make sure you have all the steps necessary. And then also if you want to dig into a little bit more difficult workflow or approval rules, you can create formulas, and this is a great helpful tool for creating formulas within your workflows and approvals. And then we also have a white paper pulled together with additional scenarios that you can use workflows and approvals within Common Ground and Luminate for. So we'll be sending that out after the webinar as well. So at this time, I'd like to open up any questions. So if you have any, please type it in the question box, and Kevin and I will answer them at this time.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. While you all furiously type away your questions, there were a few that came in throughout the webinar that I did answer directly through the questions chat box, but I wanted to go ahead and just rehash those for everybody so that in case you missed those coming through in the chat. So the first question that came through was, when we were talking about workflows, Julie showed how the workflow task could be assigned to a specific user that she defines. Okay, well, obviously that's a bit static of an assignment, and you have to know who's exactly responsible for that task. But you do have the capability to assign those tasks a little bit more dynamically to other users in the system. And the two additional ways beyond a specific user are either the opportunity owner or the associated account owner for that opportunity. So most people should be familiar or probably seen that field on the record that says owner. That's really the field I'm specifically talking to. The other way is that you can also dynamically define the new task owner or assignee as being the user who created the opportunity or the associated account for that opportunity. Okay, so those are the three ways. You've got define a specific user, the current owner of the opportunity or the account, or the user who created the opportunity or account. The next question that came in was, it was surrounding in the workflow, one of the examples Julie showed sending an actual email as part of the workflow. And so in the configuration screen, you could choose which email address that email went to. And you could define a particular user, or she chose, the associated contact for that record, okay? And the question was, it looked like the additional addresses had a limit of 5 additional email addresses, which is exactly right. On that email, you could only include up to 5 additional email addresses. However, the more specific question was, well, what do you do in the scenario where there's 300 attendees that need to get a reminder email? And to clarify, the workflow is evaluated on a record-by-record basis. So that means that each attendance record is evaluated with that workflow, and if it evaluates to true, then it sends an email to the contact for that record. And then it will go to the next record and then send the email. So what that means is that it is a one-to-one mapping between that email being sent and the event attendance record. So if you had 300 event attendees, there would be 300 unique emails going out. And so there were a couple other questions about whether this information was accessible, if there's information accessible in the Salesforce help around workflows and approval. And by all means, there's definitely information in the Salesforce help files regarding both of those. And then the other question was whether or not the presentation will be available as a recording, and we're definitely recording this, and we will make it available from our website at www.kelpartners.com. So thanks. A few other questions actually came in here. So the first question is, can I create a workflow task according to the contact instead of the opportunity? By all means, you can. If you think back to the first step in the workflow creation, you defined which type of record that workflow was being triggered off of. So Julie happened to choose the donation or the opportunity, okay, but she very well could have created the contact record if she wanted to. Or she could choose the account. She could choose a recurring gift object. You really get to determine where that workflow is triggered from. What type of record is it? And you're not limited to just one. You could have a workflow on opportunities. You could have another workflow on opportunities, and that's different criteria. And then you could have even another workflow that's off of contacts. So the next question is, how can pre-existing templates be imported into the system for use, such as an email template? To my knowledge, importing of templates isn't something you could do. I could definitely dig in just to confirm, but the creation screen for the templates is really, kind of you can either just do raw text or you can actually copy and paste HTML right into that template. The additional functionality you have in that template is to be able to actually include merge fields, so the email is a bit more personal. So it could say, Dear Kevin, as an example. Okay, so the next question was looks like we've got a user not using Convio yet. Is the list of opportunities defined by us or provided within Convio? I may not be following the question exactly, so if I don't answer this correctly, let's definitely follow up afterwards and make sure that we address that properly. But the list of opportunities, the opportunity record is really the donation. So that's the data that's being entered in the system. Now, the types of opportunities that are available, whether that's a single donation, whether that's a major gift, a recurring gift payment, those are defined as part of the Common Ground package, but you're not limited to just those. As part of being on the Salesforce platform, you do have that same capability of being able to create additional types of records in the system. Okay, so you may decide that you want a membership record type as an example. But again, if I misunderstood anybody's question, definitely feel free to follow up with us directly. You can see Julie's email address there on the screen. I'm also available at kevin@kelpartners.com. And the last question here is, can you use workflows to send to seasonal addresses? And I think the question probably revolves around the dates that you can define on seasonal addresses, meaning that this is their related address between June and May. So the thing to consider with workflows is they're always triggered around when a record is created or edited. Okay? So with that said, if you have a seasonal address, okay, you can't necessarily, through a workflow, dynamically change the address that they're using, but you can trigger workflows off of that address date. So you create the new seasonal address that starts June 1st, okay? You can, when that record is created, have a time-based workflow action that would assign a task to somebody to go update the address on their record to use that seasonal address. If you wanted to get into something more dynamic that would pick up on, okay, it's June, let's go update their primary address to be the seasonal address, that's where you really start getting into the custom development side of the Salesforce platform, where you're utilizing Apex code, triggers, as well as triggers to kind of have that automated logic built into the system. So that looks like, that's the questions that have come in. So we're just about at time here. As we mentioned, definitely the recording will be available on our website at www.kelpartners.com. And at any point, we're also, you're welcome to reach out to myself or Julie. Julie's email is on the screen. Mine is just kevin@kelpartners.com. And additionally, as Julie mentioned, we will be sending out a complimentary white paper that discusses workflows and approvals as part of this to all the registered attendees. So again, thank you everybody for your time. We really appreciate it. And we know there was a lot to take in around workflows and approvals. So if you have some additional questions, definitely let us know. But hopefully you were able to get some tidbits here that kind of spark some interest and give you an opportunity to get in there and start playing with this functionality. Thanks everybody and have a great day.
Thank you.